Hi all. So the title of this video is going to be unrelated to very different from my other videos, and the title of this video today is How I Cured My ADHD. So you might be thinking, Nathan, are you proposing some diet, some vitamins, some pills, some lifestyle change, or some tactics, like meditation or some new age treatments? My answer is none of these things. It was actually conventional medicine or conventional medical procedure that cured my ADHD symptoms. So, a little bit of a backstory. I'm 27 years old right now. It was around 20 years ago that I was given an ADHD diagnosis when I was 7 years old and starting second grade. Prior to that point in kindergarten and first grade, teachers had noted that that I had trouble following directions and staying seated and staying focused and they suspected learning disabilities as soon as kindergarten and pushed my mother to get me tested. But it was finally when I reached second grade that they suspected ADHD, and I was given a diagnosis and put on medication, which I took sporadically on and off between ages 7 and 9. I got breaks in between, especially on weekends and on vacations and on summer breaks. And eventually I stopped the medications because the side effects were so terrible. I don't remember the exact medication type I took. But anyways, it was causing side effects such as sleep deprivation, suppression of appetite, difficulties falling asleep, and therefore, for this reason, I stopped medication completely by the time I turned 9, by the time I finished grade 3 or third grade in elementary school. And from henceforth, for the next 8, 9 years or so, I slogged my way through school with the support of my parents. I was able to get passing grades throughout elementary, middle school, and even high school. I went to an online school for high school. And so you say, well, how did I eventually get cured of my ADHD? Well, it was through surgery. So what happened? I'll just give you the short version of the story. So as I said, I slogged my way. I kind of pushed my way, did my best and pushed my way through middle school, high school with the help of my parents. And so how did I get cured of this problem? It turns out that my ADHD symptoms were the result of a tumor located in my neck. So when I was 16 years old, this was in August 2014, that I um that I um that I experienced this episode of illness in which I was extremely tired, extremely weak, and I had a very fast heart rate. So I went to my family doctor and he suspected parathyroid disease, and he recommended me to specialists, to endocrinologists. And over the next year or so, I visited the endocrinologist periodically, once every 3 months to get blood tested. And eventually, in November 2015, when I was 17 years old, I underwent a CT scan, which on my neck, which indeed confirmed that I had a parathyroid tumor. So it was in January 2016 that we were finally notified of the results. So let me explain to you what hyperparathyroidism is. Hyperparathyroidism is when the parathyroid glands create too much parathyroid hormone, and thus raises your calcium levels. And for me, I had a case of primary hyperparathyroidism. And what was causing it? It was one of my parathyroid glands, the right inferior parathyroid gland, specifically that had become too large. So what is a parathyroid gland? On your thyroid gland, we all have four parathyroid glands, each of which are about the size of the size of a grain of rice. You only need one of them to function, but for me, one of them had become too large. And as I said, it was my right inferior parathyroid gland. And in November 2015, when I was 17 years old, by the time they caught it on the CT scan, my right inferior parathyroid gland was already 65 times larger than normal. And and for this reason, we don't know exactly how long it was there. But I highly suspect that it had been there throughout my entire childhood, for much of my childhood, even since for my whole life up until then. It maybe, and the thing is, its symptoms are not very obvious. This disease is also not terribly common, especially amongst children and teenagers and those under 20 years of age. It was just a few weeks after I turned 18 in early 2016 that I ended up having surgery in which the doctors made a 1 inch incision on my throat right here, and they removed a parathyroid gland. And in the months afterwards, my ADHD symptoms also subsided gradually, and I was able to attend music conservatory and graduate school music and perform trouble free, and I was able to grow. And afterwards, I actually learned French by myself to a C1 level. To pass the DELF C1 test in in June 2024 when I was 26 years old. I started learning French on my own when I was 18, and 8 years later, I was able to pass the DELF C1 French test. And I learned French completely by myself with no formal instruction. I never paid as much as a penny for my French studies. I've studied French all by myself online, practicing listening, reading, learning syntax, vocabulary, practicing my writing, and I learned a large number of piano works during my conservatory years from ages 18 to 24, including Ravel's Gaspard de la Nuit, Beethoven's Hammerklavier Sonata, almost all the entire solo piano repertoire by Maurice Ravel, and Brahms sonatas, and many other great pieces, and like Liszt B minor sonata and so forth. And I'm incredibly grateful to this. And so I just decided to give a brief testimony just to give my testimony about how I eventually got rid of my ADHD symptoms. And in my case, my ADHD symptoms were due to a tumor that had been in my neck for God knows how long. As I said, by the time they caught it when I was 17 years old, it was my right inferior parathyroid gland was 65 times larger than normal. And in my opinion, means that it had been there for an untold number of years. And I thank God that as far as my development in other areas went, it wasn't terrible. My height, the last time I measured my height was when I was 17 years old. I measured 5'11". I don't know if I've grown since then, but even if not, I'm 5'11" or 180 centimeters roughly is a pretty decent height for a guy. So the point of the matter is, I decided to make this video just to give my own testimony about how I dealt with my ADHD and just want to praise God and praise my parents and all those who were with me throughout those years who helped me get to where I am today. And so, thank you.